Bikers tried to attack an elderly black man, unaware that his dog was a retired police officer. The silence of the night was broken by the shrill sound of motorcycle engines echoing through the empty streets of Pinewood, a small town in rural Texas. James Carter, a 67-year-old black man, was out for his usual evening walk with Max, his faithful companion. Max wasn't just a dog, he was an imposing German shepherd, with intelligent eyes and a bearing that conveyed authority. However, what nobody knew, and what would become clear that night, was that Max was an ex-police dog trained to deal with the worst possible scenarios. James, a quiet pensioner, never imagined that his peaceful walk would turn into a nightmare. He was respected in Pinewood, known for his calm and wisdom. But that night, everything would change. As he walked along the sidewalk lit only by street lamps, he felt a strange chill. He wasn't alone. Max, who always walked in silence, began to emit a low growl, a sound James rarely heard. He knew it was a warning. Across the street, 3 motorcycles came to an abrupt halt and their occupants dismounted. They were large men, dressed in worn leather jackets, heavy boots and menacing looks. They started walking towards James, exchanging laughter that echoed through the deserted street. The leader of the group, a burly man with a thick beard and tattoos on his arms, looked at James and smiled sinisterly. "Look what we've got here, gentlemen," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "An old man taking a walk with his guard dog. Do you think he can protect you, Grandpa?" The other 2 men laughed, coming closer. James stopped, holding Max's collar tightly. He could feel his heart racing, but knew that showing fear would only make the situation worse. "I don't want any trouble, gentlemen. I'm just taking my walk with my dog." The leader stepped forward, tilting his head as he looked at Max. "Nice dog. But does he bite?" Max, as if he understood the provocation, began to growl louder, his teeth gleaming in the light of the street lamp. The sound was deep and threatening, enough to make anyone flinch. But these were no ordinary men. One of them pulled a chain from his pocket, wrapping it around his hand as if preparing for a fight. "I think he needs a lesson," said the man with the chain, taking a step towards James. Max immediately got into position, putting himself between James and the aggressor. He didn't bark, but his growl sounded like thunder, a clear warning that he was no ordinary dog. "You don't know who you're messing with," said James, his voice firm despite his fear. He knew that Max was trained to deal with situations like this, but he never expected that he would have to trust him so literally. "Leave us alone, or you'll regret it." The men laughed, but there was a hesitation in their eyes. They didn't know they were about to face what could be the worst mistake of their lives. The leader shrugged, as if it were just a joke. "Let's see what this dog's got," he said, moving quickly forward. That's when everything changed. Max, trained to protect and neutralize threats, acted with precision. He advanced towards the man closest to him, quickly dodging the chain he tried to use. Within seconds, Max bit the attacker's arm with controlled force, as he had been trained, immobilizing him without causing serious injury. The man screamed, falling to the ground, while the other 2 looked on with shock and confusion. "What the hell is that dog?" exclaimed one of them, picking up a piece of wood that lay on the ground. He ran towards Max, but the dog was faster. Before the man could attack him, Max knocked him down with a sharp blow, blocking his movements. James watched, trying to stay calm as everything happened. He held the phone in trembling hands and dialed the police. 3 men tried to attack me, but my dog stopped them. We're on Elm Street, near the park. Meanwhile, the 3rd man hesitated. He looked at his companions, who were on the ground, and took a step back. "This is crazy," he said, turning to run. But Max wasn't going to let anyone get away. In one agile movement, he placed himself in the man's path, blocking his escape. The man raised his hands, trembling. Okay. I give up. Just call this dog back." James finally spoke. "Max, stop." The dog obeyed immediately, returning to James' side, but keeping his gaze fixed on the fallen men. It was as if to say, "Don't try anything else." When the police sirens began to echo down the street, the men were already subdued, and Max remained vigilant. James looked at his faithful companion, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. He knew that night would be remembered forever, but the story wasn't over yet. The arrival of the police would reveal more of Max's past and bring an even more surprising outcome. The red and blue lights of the police cars illuminated the street as the officers parked and rushed out. James stood firm by Max's side, while the dog remained attentive, never looking away from the men on the ground. The scene seemed straight out of a movie. 3 bikers, previously confident, were now subdued, unable to react to an elderly man and his dog. One of the policemen, a tall man with gray hair and a rigid posture, walked up to James. "Sir, we got your call. What happened here?" His expression was serious, but as he looked at Max, his eyes widened with recognition. "I was walking with Max when these men tried to attack me," James explained, pointing to the 3 on the ground. "But Max dealt with them before they could do anything." The policeman looked at Max again, bending down to look at him more closely. "Wait, is that Max? Max from the city's K-9 department." His voice was full of surprise. James frowned, curious. "Yes, that's him. I adopted him a few years ago, after he retired from the police." "Why?" The policeman smiled, shaking his head in disbelief. "I worked with Max years ago. He was a legend in the department. That dog is responsible for some of the biggest seizures and captures we've ever had. I can't believe he's still in action." Meanwhile, the other officers began to stop the bikers. One of them, still trying to shake off the pain in his arm where Max had bitten him, shouted, "That dog is crazy. He nearly tore my arm off." The gray-haired policeman raised an eyebrow and replied calmly, "That dog saved lives, and from what I can see, he was only protecting his owner. You should consider yourself lucky that he was so merciful." Another policeman, younger and clearly a rookie, looked at Max with admiration. "So it's true. Is he the Max from the training tapes? My instructor always talked about him like he was a legend." "That's him," confirmed the older policeman. "And he doesn't seem to have lost his touch." As the officers handcuffed the men, James felt a sense of relief come over him, but also a growing curiosity. He knew that Max was special, but he had no idea that his dog was so well known. "So Max really was a legend in the police force?" he asked the gray-haired officer. "More than that," the man replied with a smile. "Max was one of the best. Smart, fast, loyal. He saved lives and dealt with some of the most dangerous situations. And from what I've seen today, he's still the same hero." The bikers, now completely defeated, were put into the cars. One of them, still nervous, tried to justify his actions. "We weren't going to do anything serious. It was just a joke." The younger policeman laughed humorlessly. "A joke? With an old man and a dog? Sounds more like an attempt to intimidate me. And you picked the wrong people." As the cars drove away, James looked at Max, who finally relaxed, his tongue hanging out of the side of his mouth as if nothing had happened. He bent down and ran his hand over the dog's head. "You're amazing, kid. I don't know what I'd do without you." The gray-haired policeman smiled as he watched the interaction. "You know, Mr. Carter, dogs like Max aren't just pets. They're partners, heroes. And tonight, he proved that no matter how much time has passed, he's still ready to protect those he loves." James nodded, touched. "I always knew Max was special, but today, he saved my life." As the policeman prepared to leave, he turned to James with a suggestion. "Max deserves recognition for that. He may have retired, but he's still an example of courage and loyalty. We should do something to honor him." James smiled, but before he could reply, a group of neighbors began to approach. They had heard the commotion and were curious to know what had happened. Among them was an elderly woman called Martha, who always chatted to James during their walks. "James, I hear there's been trouble. Are you all right?" she asked, visibly worried. "Thanks to Max, I am," replied James, briefly explaining what had happened. The neighbors were impressed. Many of them already knew Max and knew he was a special dog, but hearing how he had dealt with 3 dangerous men single-handedly made them even more admiring. One young neighbor even started recording a video to share the story, saying, "The world needs to know about Max, the hero dog." As the night wore on, James began to reflect on what had happened. He knew that Max was loyal and protective, but that night proved that his dog wasn't just a companion. He was a true hero, ready to face any threat, even years after his retirement. The following days were full of excitement in the Pinewood neighborhood. The story of James and Max spread like wildfire. The video that the neighbor had recorded began to circulate on social media, earning headlines such as "Retired police dog saves his owner from bikers" and "The canine hero who hasn't lost his touch." Within hours, the video had accumulated thousands of views, and the comments were full of admiration and gratitude. "This dog is a living legend," wrote one user. "James and Max are the definition of courage and loyalty," commented another. However, for James, it all seemed surreal. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, let alone Max, who, for all his skill, was a humble dog, content with an evening stroll and a bowl of food. The next morning, James was sitting on his porch drinking coffee when he heard the sound of a car parking in front of his house. As he looked, he saw a group of people getting out, including the gray-haired police officer from the night before, some colleagues from the department and a local reporter with a camera. "James," called out the policeman, waving as he approached. "I hope you don't mind an unexpected visit. We wanted to do something special for Mac." James frowned, curious, as the group approached with enthusiastic smiles. The policeman was carrying a box with something inside that was hidden under a red cloth. "After the night you had, we thought it was time to officially recognize Max," he explained. "He may be retired, but he remains an example of service and courage." With a dramatic gesture, the policeman removed the cloth, revealing a shiny medal attached to a new leather collar. The medal had the words "Pinewood Hero" engraved on it, along with the date of the incident. "This is for Max, in recognition of his bravery," said the policeman, handing James the collar. James took the collar carefully, his eyes watering with emotion. He knelt down next to Max, who was watching everything with his characteristic calm, and put the collar around his neck. Max shook his head slightly, as if adjusting, and then sat up straight, almost posing for the camera. "You deserve it, kid," said James, stroking the dog with a smile full of pride. The reporter took several photos and started asking James questions about Max and what had happened that night. James answered humbly, giving all the credit to his faithful companion. "I always knew Max was special," he said. "But what he did that night, he reminded me that loyalty and courage can come from where we least expect it." The group stayed at James' house for a while, chatting and taking more photos of Max, who seemed to enjoy all the attention. When they finally left, James felt a wave of gratitude. Not just for the recognition, but for having Max by his side every day. Over the next few days, the Pinewood community showed a new kind of unity. Neighbors who previously barely knew each other began to greet James and Max during their evening walks. Some even brought treats for the hero dog. Children ran up to pet Max, calling him Super Max or the Guardian of Pinewood. One evening, while James was walking with Max, he was approached by Martha, the neighbor who always greeted him. She was holding something in her hands, a small frame with a hand-drawn picture of Max, in a heroic style, with a red cape and a medal around his neck. "My granddaughter wanted to do this for you," said Martha, handing over the frame. She heard the story and was so inspired that she wanted to pay tribute to Mac. James was moved by the gesture. "Tell her it's beautiful. I'll hang it in the living room. Max will love it." Max seemed to understand, wagging his tail and giving Martha's hand a lick. But not everyone was so happy with the way things were going. The bikers who had tried to attack James had not escaped the incident unscathed. Security cameras in the area captured all the action, including the moment when one of them pulled out a knife. The evidence was overwhelming, and they faced charges that kept them in jail pending trial. James, on the other hand, decided that he wanted to attend court. He knew it was important to show that not only he, but the whole community, would not tolerate that kind of behavior. "They need to understand," James told the gray-haired policeman, "that what they did was not just an attack on me, but on everyone who struggles to live with dignity." Days turned into weeks, and James and Max's story continued to resonate throughout the Pinewood community and beyond. The trial of the bikers brought a sense of justice. During the hearing, James, accompanied by Max, was invited to testify. In a firm voice, he recounted the events of that night, highlighting not only Max's courage, but the importance of everyone standing together against violence and intimidation. The bikers, now visibly remorseful, listened in silence. The sentence was severe enough to ensure that they would think twice before repeating any similar action. But James, true to his compassionate nature, hoped that they would really change their lives. "Sometimes a hard lesson can be the starting point for becoming a better person," he said as he left court. Shortly afterwards, Pinewood Town Hall organized a special event in Max's honor. Families, neighbors, and even people from surrounding neighborhoods attended. There was a large plaque with the words, "Honoring a Hero, Max, the Guardian of Pinewood," and a replica of the medal Max had received was on display for all to see. At the event, James was invited on stage to speak. With Max sitting next to him, he thanked the community for all their support and reminded everyone of what it really meant to be brave. "Courage," he said, looking at Max with a smile, "is not the absence of fear, but the will to protect what is right, even when you are scared." Max taught me that every day. When the crowd applauded, Max seemed to understand that he was the center of attention. He wagged his tail and even gave a short bark, drawing laughter and more applause from the audience. On his way home that evening, James stopped with Max in the small park where they used to walk. The place was brighter, thanks to the new streetlights installed by the city council after the incident. He looked at Max, who was now lying next to him, and said, "They're calling you a hero, but for me you've always been that. Thank you, Max, for everything." Max lifted his head, wagged his tail and leaned against his owner, as if to say that it was no big deal. James and Max's story wasn't just an isolated event. It became a symbol of unity, courage and the strength that comes from the unexpected. It was a powerful reminder that, even in the most difficult times, there are heroes, be they people or dogs, who show up to remind us of the best we can be. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel and spread the word. Together, we can continue to tell inspiring stories that remind us of the power of kindness, courage, and unity. See you in the next video.